Again, this is the reading guide for Wednesday, January 21st. I'm going to start and do chapter 1 here and the Berkeley PDF, and then I will do a separate reading guide for chapter 2 and the Darwin-Wallace paper. So here we are with chapter 1. This chapter gives you an introduction to evolution in general and also to this textbook. Here's how I want you to read this chapter, and I will go through and tell you some sections you don't need to read. Right away, they're going to start off with their learning objectives here, and those are, of course, important. You can take a look at that and see if you already know some of this, and that will get you prepared for reading the chapter. And will also let you know what's coming up you want to focus on. So things like compare and contrast natural selection and genetic drift as mechanisms of change, and then they'll get into misconceptions as well. Okay, so here they start off with a discussion about whales. This is an excellent case study, and we will use this story about whales to interpret other parts of this text and other texts we are reading. So pay good attention to the example of whales. I liked this section here, so I highlighted that because it talks about what good is evolution, and I like the phrasing there. Dobzhansky has some great quotes about evolution. So keep reading here. Now we get really into this case study on whales. And here's where I'm going to tell you what you should be writing down as you're reading. So this is very active reading that I'm asking you to do. First thing first, anytime you see a vocabulary word on the side, make sure you know that word and that you can find it in the text and understand what it means in the text. I will not ask you to define words. I will not give you questions saying, what is a lineage? And then have you choose the right answer. For the most part, I will use the word lineage in the question. So if you don't know the vocabulary, you will have trouble interpreting the question. The question will be about some concept, but it will use the vocabulary. So that's how I'm hoping you'll understand the words as you read through. Here I'm asking you to, as you read about whales, list the lines of evidence for the relationship between whales and their closest living land animals. How well supported is that relationship? What kinds of evidence are there that support it, and what kinds of evidence could refute it? So you're going to keep reading through this, and I always want you to look at the figures. In fact, one thing you can do is sit down and look at the figures before you even read the text. Okay, so what is this figure telling you? This is showing you different views of a skull. This is Dorodon, a 40-million-year-old whale. It's going to show you the different types of teeth that it has, and then it's going to talk to you about teeth, right? And it's comparing this with a modern killer whale. You'll notice back on that page that go back forward again, that there are a few more terms: natural selection, which you should know; convergent evolution, you should also already know; synapomorphies, this is a critical one here that you should be comfortable using. I will have a question that has synapomorphies in the text of it on your quiz. Okay, as we keep going, basically I just want you to keep writing down that list of evidence. It could be a long list, so make sure you have paper at hand. Don't just write in your text. There will be times where I may say that you can have your notes out but not your textbook, so make sure you're taking notes separately. It's okay to highlight in the text, but I also want you to write out answers to questions. Don't try to just write them on the side of your textbook. Okay, I want to point out, actually, they talk quite a bit in this chapter about a researcher from University of Michigan, Phil Gingrich. When we go to Michigan for the symposium in March, we may have a chance to see him. We will certainly have a chance to see people who work with him and see some of these fossils that are on exhibit. So this is a pretty exciting example to start off with, of course. Okay, so as we keep going, this figure I want you to pay a lot of attention to. A number of you had trouble with the time frame of evolution. You did not know if things evolve in millions of years or hundreds of thousands or billions of years. So as we go through this course, we're going to pay a lot of attention to time frame. So right here at the top of this, it is telling you how many millions of years ago different divergences happened in the whale lineage. So you can see these pink lines here are telling you traits that evolved when they evolved. If a trait evolved here, it means that any divergence after this, any species that comes off of this tree will have that trait, unless there's been a reversal later on, in which case that will be mentioned. So I want to point out things like colonizing saltwater habitat and when that happened. So look back up on this time frame of evolution, and we're seeing it around 50 million years. Okay, so pay attention to time frame of evolution, particularly in this example. That's something I'm going to want to ask you about on the quiz. I'm going to make a quick point here. They talk about using DNA sequences. That's something we will do quite a bit of in this semester. They mentioned that DNA is fragile. It may not last for more than a few 100,000 years. I want to point out that the time frame that we can recover right now jumped in the last 2 years. It was about 70,000 years was the oldest specimen we've been able to get DNA out of. 2 years ago, we got something out of 700,000 years. So this has made a huge jump. There are considerations that suggest we may not be able to get any further back in time, but it's an area of active research for a lot of us. Okay. Keep reading through here, paying close attention to the figures. A lot of times I'll put a figure on a test and I will ask you to explain the figure. I may remove something like the axis label here and ask you to tell me what that label is. Not planning to do that on this figure, but maybe for one of the other ones in this chapter. Okay, so now you're through the whale section and you're going to be reading about viruses. And these are two really interesting comparisons. The whale evolution is a million-year kind of evolution, and here we get into flu evolution where we're talking about really fast evolution. So I want you to have these two examples because they're very different in terms of time scales, and they exemplify different parts of evolution. Okay, I'm assigning a lot of reading, you'll notice here, because this is easy reading. I picked this textbook because you can read a lot of it, and it's not very heavy. It should flow really well, but that does mean that you need to pay attention to the questions I'm asking you to answer. Here we have, why do you need an annual flu shot, but you only need a tetanus shot every 10 years? Think about that as you're reading through this section on flu evolution. On the next page here, my note on the side is, what traits make a virus more likely to survive and reproduce? Think about that, write answers to those questions. Next I have, what is reassortment? What role has it played in flu evolution? How did evolutionary biology contribute to our understanding of the H1N1 in 2009? And they spend a lot of time on this in the text, so make sure you have a specific answer to this. It may be a couple of ways that evolutionary biology contributed, but 2009 showed a very different way of using evolution to understand emerging infectious diseases. It's a very good example. Okay. I want to point out, we're going to get to this section here, 1.3, and I am not really anxious for you to read this in great detail. I want you to get the section on genetic drift, so pay attention to maybe this part right here about genetic drift, and then the rest of it is basically introducing you to the textbook. You may skim through that, that's fine, but I'm not really anxious about that. I'm assuming that you all know what a phenotype is. If you're not sure, then go ahead and read this real carefully for phenotype up here. Okay. Now we're going to get into common misconceptions about evolution. You're mostly not going to read this section. I give you some additional reading on misconceptions, and I don't need you to duplicate things. You can skim this if you want, but basically I'm asking you to read 2 bullet points that are not in the other reading, and they are numbers 15 and 17. So number 15 here, evolution seeks a peaceful harmony in nature, and misconception 17 about stable diversity of life. Those are the 2 that I want you to get out of this. I want to point out that they're going to sum up in very, very, very broad concepts here. One thing, so I might use some of these. If you look through this and you didn't get something out of this chapter, you may need to go back. I may ask you something like, here, what are 2 mechanisms of evolution? Natural selection and drift. I might ask you, how are these 2 mechanisms of evolution different? How are they the same? So that's kind of how to use this summing up to figure out what I might be asking you about. Multiple choice questions, these are good questions that you can quiz yourself on. The answers are in the back of the textbook. So those are great. And actually, as I was looking at this, some of the questions that I'm asking you to answer are actually in here. It's funny, I came up with them on my own and then found they were here. So here's an example. Why does protection from a single vaccination rarely last longer than a year? That's not too different from the question that I asked you. So it looks like they think pretty similarly to me. So think through these short answer questions. These will help you when you are preparing. Okay, the next and last thing in this reading guide is going to be misconceptions about evolution. So here we have a document from Berkeley, and this I downloaded from their website. You can do the same. And I also handed it out in class. There are links that are functional in here, so you can click on them if you want. They have a fantastic website. Haven't found anything I don't like on it. Basically what I want you to do as you read through this, I specifically asked you to read chapter 1 first because I want you to use the example of whale evolution and flu evolution as you read these myths. So for instance, you're going to start here with evolution as a theory about the origin of life. Okay, is it? Is the whale or flu evolution examples, is that about the origin of life or not? So you're going to be running this constantly through your head. You're basically looking at this through a filter of whale and flu evolution. Next, you've got evolutionary theory implies that life evolved and continues to evolve randomly or by chance. Okay, so which parts of whale evolution, for example, is random? So early whales could not survive in a saltwater environment. Which part of the process that led to whales living now exclusively in saltwater was random versus not random? Okay, one last example here. What's our next one? Evolution results in progress. Organisms are always getting better through evolution. Okay, so is the flu virus this year better than last year? Go ahead and answer these questions as you're reading, okay? You're not going to read this entire PDF. I just want you to read, actually I'm just going to tell you the sections I want you to eliminate. Do not, at this time, you are not responsible for reading section 3, which is all about evolutionary trees. In fact, this is a large section, so you should be very thankful I'm not asking you to know this right now. You don't need to know that. Okay. Then you are going to pick up reading again at section 4, misconceptions about population genetics. Yes, definitely read that. You're going to keep going, reading about evolution and nature of science. Some of this will be easy reading for you. That's great. I'm not going to hold you responsible for the acceptance of evolution. I think you probably would not be in this class if you had issues with these myths, so don't worry about that. I do think a lot of you are interested in morality, and so I'm going to have you guys look at implications of evolution. And then finally the last one, evolution and religion. I think that many of you will find this interesting as well. So go ahead and read that last misconception. And that's all you'll be responsible for from chapter 1 and from misconceptions about evolution. I will do potentially a shorter reading guide on chapter 2 and the Darwin-Wallace paper next.